Hello everyone, Giant Stonehead here. I want to try a little bit different format this week. More topical video instead of something about very ancient history. We're going to discuss the current hantavirus outbreak, what the disease is, what's going on, whether you should be worried about it. There's a lot of fear mongering online, and I thought I could jump in and add my thoughts to things, being somebody who's at least a little bit educated in science. Studied biology in my undergrad and did a little bit of public health for a master's degree, even though I didn't finish it. Been in healthcare for a long time. So, this has always been outbreaks and diseases have always been a interest of mine. So it's kind of up my alley. I thought maybe you guys would find it interesting. So, if you enjoy obscure science and forgotten history, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Now, let's talk about hantavirus. Hantaviruses are a group of viruses primarily carried by rodents and transmitted to humans through exposure to infected animal excretions. The viruses belong to a family that causes two major syndromes in humans: hantavirus pulmonary syndrome, HPS, mainly in the Americas, and hemorrhagic fever with renal syndrome, HFRS, more common in Europe and Asia. HPS is more relevant to the current outbreak. Humans typically become infected when they inhale airborne particles contaminated with rodent urine, feces, or saliva. This often occurs in enclosed or poorly ventilated areas such as cabins, sheds, or homes where rodents have been present. Unlike many diseases, hantavirus does not usually spread from person to person. However, a rare strain known as the Andes virus, which, as you might guess, is primarily found in South America, has demonstrated limited human-to-human transmission in cases of prolonged exposure. The Andes strain is what is currently causing the 2026 outbreak. The primary mode of transmission is environmental exposure. When rodent droppings or nesting materials are disturbed, tiny virus-containing particles can become airborne and inhaled. Other, less common routes include touching contaminated surfaces, then touching the face, consuming contaminated food, or being bitten by an infected rodent. Certain populations face a higher risk of exposure. These include people living in rural or semi-rural areas, agricultural workers and farmers, campers, hikers, and other outdoor enthusiasts, and individuals cleaning enclosed spaces such as attics or barns. However, the risk is not limited to remote regions. In the United States, deer mice, which are the most common carrier of hantavirus, can inhabit homes, garages, and storage areas, creating potential exposure even in suburban settings. And just as a added note, rodent carriers in South America can include the rice rat and the vesper mouse, which, since the current outbreak began in Argentina and is the Andes strain, it's probably one of those that transmitted it. Hantavirus infections causing HPS are difficult to diagnose early on because initial symptoms resemble common viral illnesses such as influenza. Symptoms typically appear 1 to 8 weeks after exposure. The early symptoms can include fever, fatigue, muscle aches, headaches and dizziness, nausea, and abdominal pain and discomfort. As the disease progresses, particularly in HPS, patients may develop severe respiratory symptoms. These include coughing and shortness of breath as fluid accumulates in the lungs. This stage can rapidly become life-threatening. According to the CDC, approximately 40% of HPS cases are fatal, making it one of the more dangerous viral respiratory illnesses known to man. There is currently no specific antiviral or cure a widely available vaccine for hantavirus. Treatment is primarily supportive, focusing on managing symptoms and maintaining oxygen levels. Early hospitalization significantly improves survival chances, particularly if respiratory support is initiated promptly. Because early symptoms mimic other illnesses, diagnosis often occurs only after disease has progressed. Physicians rely on patient history, particularly rodent exposure, along with laboratory testing to confirm infection. The lack of targeted treatments underscores the importance of prevention, which remains the most effective strategy against hantavirus infection. Preventing hantavirus centers on minimizing contact with rodents and their environments. Public health agencies recommend several key precautions. Seal homes and buildings to prevent rodent entry, store food securely and dispose of garbage properly, avoid sweeping or vacuuming rodent droppings, which can aerosolize the virus. Use disinfectants when cleaning contaminated areas. Wear protective gear, such as gloves and masks, when handling potential infestations. These measures are especially important in areas where rodent populations are known to carry the virus. So, to today. And earlier this month, in May of 2026, Hantavirus made international headlines following an outbreak aboard the expedition cruise ship HV Hondius. The incident resulted in 3 confirmed deaths and several suspected infections as of the writing of this article, prompting coordinated global health response. Note that I wrote this article over the weekend, so events might have advanced since then. Health authorities, including the World Health Organization and the CDC, identified the likely cause as the Andes strain of the hantavirus. Though, as we mentioned earlier, this strain is notable because it can sometimes spread between humans, which obviously among a cruise ship where you're packed in pretty close is potentially a recipe for disaster. Right now, the available information points to an ornithologist who had visited a landfill in Argentina to photograph birds as patient zero, and it seems to have spread person to person once he was back aboard the ship. Despite the severity of individual cases, officials emphasized that the overall risk to the general public remained low. Monitoring efforts were launched in multiple countries, including the United States, where travelers who had been aboard the ship were observed for symptoms. So, this outbreak showed several important points about hantavirus. Again, to reiterate, the environmental origin is the primary means of transmission. The source was probably rodents in that landfill where the ornithologist visited. Human-to-human spread is rare but possible. It does look like the Andes strain did spread from person to person on the ship, so far as we could tell. And global travel can amplify concern. So this is a pretty rare disease. It's not often you see hantavirus, or especially hantavirus that spreads person to person. But it just so happened to happen on a cruise ship where it's going to make international news. So hantavirus is found worldwide, but the types of disease they cause varies by region. So in the Americas, it causes HPS, and in Europe and Asia, it causes the hemorrhagic fever with renal syndrome. So the current outbreak is HPS. And doesn't look like the hemorrhagic fever actually spreads from person to person. So that's a plus. You get tens of thousands of cases of hantavirus annually. Most of the time they are concentrated in endemic regions, which is like where the disease is native. So the United States reports relatively few cases each year, but the high fatality rate makes the disease a significant public health concern. Environmental factors such as climate patterns, food availability for rodents, and human encroachment into wildlife habitats can influence outbreak patterns. Increased rainfall, for example, can boost rodent populations and elevate transmission risk. Hantavirus is rare, but it does show us a broader trend emerging among infectious disease. So there's a phenomena of zoonotic spillover. Try to say that 5 times fast. So COVID-19 was also a zoonotic virus, and there's been other recent outbreaks of different viruses, such as Ebola, Marburg, things like that. And hantavirus is the same thing. It originates in a human or in animals and crosses into humans. And they call it a spillover because it moves from the reservoir species, which is the species that it natively infects, into another species. And this is becoming more of a problem as human populations expand and intrude more on ecosystems that they may not have been previously exposed to. Another issue emerging is the diagnostic complexity of a lot of these viruses because they have non-specific early symptoms. They're harder to detect and control. So the hantavirus looks like a flu. So it's going to make it a lot harder to contain because early on you're not going to know whether it's a flu or whether it's something with a high fatality rate, which brings us to the next point. Hantavirus has a really high fatality rate at about 40%, and the case numbers are low, but it looks really alarming to people when they see that 40% number. Even though technically something like COVID that spreads a lot faster but has a lot lower mortality rate can actually kill more people. So, pick your poison, I suppose. But related to that is global connectivity. So, modern travel allows diseases to spread pretty quickly. Something can originate in Argentina and then become a headline because it outbreaks in a cruise ship and technically spreads to the rest of the world, even though the people there, that are being taken back to their home countries aren't really at risk of spreading it beyond maybe the healthcare workers who are taking care of them. So, I mean, we saw it in COVID too, that it spread, along transport routes, along airports, that sort of thing. But COVID spread a lot more readily. So it was more of a concern. But generally speaking, the globe being as connected as it did, it can make a virus that is relatively obscure and it may not spread in earlier days, it may not have spread beyond that particular region. It can make it a global issue. So, overall, my thoughts on the hantavirus outbreak and whether you should worry about it. Um, well, I'm not worried about it. Not really. The World Health Organization has rated the chance of a pandemic from this as low. It looks like the Andes strain doesn't spread very rapidly. It's not like COVID where it can, hang in the air for a couple hours after, somebody sneezes or something. Or if it does, it's not in a high enough load. It's not virulent enough that it can infect you from that. It looks like you have to be in close quarters, which, they were on a cruise ship. So, and yeah, I doubt the cruise ship has probably sufficient filters to deal with something like that. So it's not something I'm really worried about myself. I mean, if you're immunocompromised or something like that, just practice the old COVID precautions, wear a mask, use hand sanitizer, that sort of thing. I would be more worried about it. I mean, I live in an old house, so that's more where I'm worried about catching it, because I mean, when I cleaned my attic, I wore a N95 mask because I was cleaning out old bird nests. But I was like, I don't want to inhale all that nesting material, and who knows what was up there. Mice and squirrels and birds and coal dust and whatever else was up there. I wasn't inhaling all that, so I wore a mask when I cleaned it. So, all the precautions I kind of laid out earlier in the video are still valid, and that's frankly how you're more likely to get the virus. You're probably not very likely to come in contact with a current cruise ship passenger, but you are more likely to, have to clean your yard, maybe clean an old building. So, the precautions you should be taking anyway when doing that are, your best defense. Uh, Wanted to address a couple other things about hantavirus. Just an anecdote. The first time I remember hearing about it was like back in the 90s, I think. And I remember there was a big flap about it. And I don't know if it was because it was the first time it was identified or if it was just the first time that the media learned about it. But I remember a lady caught hantavirus from a pop can. So, she went to drink her soda and, there had been mice running through the warehouse and peeing on the cans and stuff. And she didn't wipe her soda can before she took a drink, and she got hantavirus from that. And I remember it being on the news, and I remember mom always taking like having wipies or something like that handy, wipe the, or we wipe it off on our shirts, and you find all kinds of dirt on the pop cans and stuff, and it was really nasty. So that's the first time I remember hearing about it. And the other thing is, I'm seeing a lot of fear mongering about it, which is part of why I wanted to make this video. And the one thing that I saw was that people were trying to connect it to the vaccines for COVID, and because there is, and it looked like it was legitimate, buried in the fact sheets about the COVID vaccines was your risk of hantavirus increasing. But that's just because when you take that vaccine, right after you take it, especially if you're, feeling crappy and you're getting all the side effects, yeah, your immune system's down, so you're going to be more vulnerable to viruses. And hantavirus would probably be one of them, especially because it's a respiratory virus. So, uh, I didn't look into it any more than that, but I mean, I'm just using common sense here, which isn't that common. So, especially when it comes to anything involving health or a virus or anything like that. And the third thing was, I did see a video floating around about there's a preliminary genomic study of the outbreak, and they're looking at samples of virus from different people all over the globe who have been infected by it, who were on the ship. And based on the early genomic sampling, it looks like the virus, it is the Andes strain, and it's staying very genetically stable, meaning it's not mutating. So it's not very likely that it's going to mutate and become somehow more virulent and spread wildly, because it's just not something that just spreads easily among humans. So it looks like this is probably going to blow over. Give it a few weeks until the last cases are identified, and it kind of runs its course, and then everybody will forget about it probably by about mid-June. So I wouldn't get too worried about it. But anyway, that's just me doing a topical video. Maybe I'll do these a little bit here and there if I see something that catches my eye in more modern science. And, I have plans for videos on straight scientific topics anyway, but this one just kind of caught my eye. Anyway, please feel free to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I'll be posting here weekly. If there's anything you'd like me to cover next, let me know. And thanks so much for watching.